Hello everyone, it's Oliver from Minerva and this is a sew-along video for the Grainline Studio's Linden Sweatshirt pattern. It can sometimes be intimidating if you have never picked up a sewing pattern before or are still relatively new to sewing. So this video we will take you through the process step by step with some helpful tips along the way. We know that everyone sews at their own pace, so there will be plenty of opportunities to pause this video and spend as much time as you like on your project. The Grainline Studio Linden Sweatshirt sewing pattern is listed as a beginner level sewing pattern. Techniques involved include sewing with knit fabrics, straight seams and attaching ribbing. This pattern includes two variations of the sweatshirt and features a graceful scooped neckline and relaxed fit. View A features long sleeves and cuffs and falls to around mid-hip, whereas View B features short sleeves and hits the high hip area. Now, of course, you can always mix and match the body and sleeve lengths for different variations of your desired fit. This pattern suggests to use medium weight fabrics with at least 20% stretch, such as French terry, sweatshirt fleece, sweater knits and jersey. Of course, it's always great to note that more fabric may be required should you need to match up plaids, stripes or one-way print designs. For this pattern, we have chosen to use this very soft fleece back stretch knit fabric. It comes in a wide range of colours, perfect for any style. This one here is cornflower blue and we have decided to match this with the coordinating colour cornflower blue in the tubular rib stretch knit fabric, and this is obviously for the cuffs of the garment and around the bottom of the hem of the jumper. Both fabrics have a great amount of stretch in them, making it a perfect choice for this sweatshirt pattern. One of the great things about this pattern is that the only other notion you need is thread. Now, it's up to you whether you want to choose a contrasting or coordinating thread. However, for this garment, we recommend the Gutermann's Sew All polyester thread. Both strong and durable, it's a perfect choice for all of your sewing projects. The 100-meter reels come in a wide range of different colours, so there will always be a perfect match for your project. We will be using shade 213 to coordinate with the colour of our fabric. Of course, all of these products will be tagged down below so that you can easily find them. So now that we have gathered all of our materials, let's get started. So first, let's open up this Grainline Studio pattern and have a look what's inside. Straight away, we have the instructions booklet, and inside we obviously have the different pattern pieces here. The thing we love about this pattern, it has a very informative booklet along with it. This obviously includes all of the instructions to assemble the garment. It has pattern details, information on measurements and preparation for your garment. Of course, this video we will talk you through all of that, so no need to worry about that. So the first thing we need to do in order to prepare all of our materials ready to sew would be to pre-wash our fabrics. Be sure to use the same method you intend to clean your garment with once finished. This will prevent the possibility of your garment shrinking after the first wash. Of course, all fabrics are different, so it's great to read the care instructions listed on our website for each fabric. If you are unsure, it's great to test wash a sample piece of fabric first to find the most suitable way to wash your chosen fabric. We advise to wash these fabrics at 40 degrees, but please take into consideration a 10% shrinkage with all fabrics. In the meantime, while our fabric is washing, we can take some measurements and work out which size we will need to cut out from the pattern pieces. Now, in the instruction booklet, there really is only 3 measurements we need, and that is the bust, the waist and the hips. Now, if we take our tape measure and for the bust, measure it around the bust here. So I am at around 41 inches. The waist, we're at, for me that's around 33, and then hips, again around 42 inches. The measurements I've just taken are closest to the size 14 in this pattern. However, as you can see, some of the measurements were between sizes. Now, if you are between sizes, we do recommend to size up to the next size. For me, I'm going to stay at size 14 because I do like a bit more of a fitted garment. As always, this is personal preference, and you can always look at the finished measurements below this size chart, and it tells me for size 14, the bust is going to be 46.5 inches. That's going to be plenty of room to move around, so I know that the garment will at least fit. So once you've taken your measurements and looked at the measurement chart to choose your pattern size, you can now get on with cutting out that selected size from the pattern. So now that we are ready to cut out our size from the pattern, we can find the corresponding dashed line to the size we are using and cut out each of the pattern pieces. As you can see here in the pattern notes, it gives you a key of all of the different pattern lines for each corresponding size. I will be choosing size 14, so I will be looking out for this dashed mark on the pattern to cut out. And here we have a pattern symbol key of different elements of the pattern. Now, if you are sewing view B, which is the short sleeved variation, you only need to cut out pieces 1, 2, 3 and 4. However, because we are sewing view A, which is the long sleeves with cuffs, we will be cutting out all 6 pieces from this sheet. This is a great opportunity to pause the video to take as much time as you need to cut out your pattern pieces from the pattern sheet. Now that you have all of your pieces from the pattern, we can collect our pre-washed fabric to start cutting out the pieces. So now that all of our fabric has been pre-washed, we're going to hang it up to dry so that we can then move on with making our garment. Now that the fabric is dry and ready to use, you can lay out your pattern pieces on the fabric following the cut-in layout diagrams depending on the width of your fabric. For this pattern, the fabric should be folded selvage to selvage with right sides facing outwards. Selvage is the woven finished edge of the fabric which runs the length of the fabric. It is created when a fabric is woven on a loom and it runs parallel to the lengthwise grain. The right side of the fabric refers to the side that will be on the outside of the garment, and the wrong side of the fabric is the side that will be on the inside. So once you have all of your pieces laid out on the fabric with the grain line on the pattern piece running parallel with the selvage of the fabric, you can then start to trace around the outside with either a fabric marker or pencil or chalk, whichever would show up best on your fabric. Now to do this, it does help if you have pattern weights also to place on the pieces so that they don't move around when you're drawing around the outside of the pattern piece. Remember to transfer all markings to the fabric. That includes notches such as here. So I would transfer just with a little notch there. That lets me know later on when I'm joining the garment together that this is something that we should match up between pattern pieces. So as you can see, you should just trace around, roughly trace around the outside of all the pattern pieces on the fabric. And do this with all of the pieces that are required for the variation you are choosing to make. As you can see here where the symbol says place on fold, this is actually on the fold of the fabric, so that when I cut this out, I can open it up and this is going to actually be the front panel of the sweatshirt. Mark the center, front and back of each piece placed on the fold with a notch. So pattern piece number 1 and pattern piece number 2 are the ones that will be placed on the fold. So remember just to add a notch marking on the fold line here so that you can see the center of the piece later on. A notch can be one of two things. Firstly, it can refer to a mark on the pattern used to correctly align the pattern pieces. These can be clipped into your seam allowance when cutting out your pattern pieces, but be sure not to clip more than halfway into your designated seam allowance. Secondly, a notch can refer to a small triangle cut into the seam allowance. Used on outward curves, a notch eliminates excess fabric within the garment, leaving your seams to lie flat and smooth. When notching a seam allowance, be sure to cut to and not through the stitching line. When cutting out your pieces, cut away the lines you traced on the fabric and don't forget to clip your notches.
For view A, pattern pieces 4, 5 and 6 gives you the choice to either cut out of self or ribbing.
In a pattern, the term self refers to the main fabric used in your garment. This would be a great opportunity to pause the video and cut out all of the pattern pieces needed for your project. If you are using a standard sewing machine with this project, you can use a stretch stitch, which is available on some machines. Otherwise, you can use a narrow zigzag stitch. Use a ballpoint needle and regular thread and be sure not to stretch the fabric as you sew. You may find it useful to lessen the pressure foot tension on your machine or use a walking foot. It's advisable to use a piece of scrap fabric first and to test out your chosen stitch just to get the right settings for your machine and your garment. So starting with the instructions of this pattern, it says note that all seam allowances are 1/4 of an inch. So step 1 says to sew the front sleeve edge to the shirt front with right sides facing each other. Okay, so for this we need pattern pieces number 1 and one of the sleeves. So here is the front, that's the back, we'll save that for later, and we have the sleeves, one of the sleeves. So here, if you can remember, when we put the notches in on the edge of the pattern pieces, these are what we're going to use to match these pieces together. So on the front piece, there is only one notch. So for that, we are going to look for the side of the sleeve that has one notch, because as you can see, one side has one notch and the other side has a double notch. Now that double notch would be for sewing to the back panel. So we're going to make sure that we have the right side of the sleeve and we are going to line them up. This says right sides facing each other. So the right side of the fabric is what we want to be on the outside of the garment, which is these. So right sides together, we are going to line them up, as you can see, matching the notches there. I'm going to sew all the way down this seam at 1/4 seam allowance. It's always good near the end to do a back stitch for security. And there we go, we can cut that thread. So now, as you can see, we have the sleeve sewn to the front panel. Now for step 2, it says repeat the same on the other sleeve, and then what we'll do is we'll take it to the iron and we'll press the seam allowance towards the front piece. It's also a good point to say that you can finish your seams off in a couple of different ways. Now we're going to choose to overlock them just so that it's clean and it'll cut off the excess of the seam allowance. However, you could also run a zigzag stitch along this again, catching the edge of the seam. So here with the front piece in front of me, I'm going to take the other sleeve piece and again match up the same. So the notches there goes with the notch on the front. And I'm just going to use a pin to pin these pieces together, just to hold while we're going through the machine. So this is the wrong side of the fabric. As you can see, this is the center front piece. These are the sleeves and the overlocked edge of the seam. What we're going to do is with the iron, we're going to press that towards the front of the shirt. So for step 3, we are basically going to do the exact same thing, however this time with the back piece. Now the two sleeves are already attached to the front. So with right sides together and matching this time the double notches, which are here. Matching them together with right sides together, we are going to sew the back panel to both of the sleeves. So there we go, lining them up, lining the double notch, and again with a few pins just to secure that in place when we sew it together. So this is creating the basic outline of the jumper, and using a stretch stitch you want to sew these two pieces together. So now we will repeat the same thing with the other sleeve. However, as you can see, this time it's going to complete a closed circle. And this will end up being the neckline of the garment. So again, we're going to sew with right sides together. This other sleeve with the back panel, ensuring that the notches and the edges of the pieces are aligned. Of course, you can pause this video should you wish to spend a little extra time on your project. So here we go, sewing the second sleeve to the back piece. So just like we did for the front section, we are going to finish these seams however you like. We will overlock them together, otherwise you could zigzag stitch and catch the end. And then we are going to press them towards the back panel of the sweatshirt. But as you can already see, we are starting to form that sweatshirt shape. Obviously we need to close the side seams and add the cuffs and the hem, but we are very nearly almost there. So once we have pressed all of the sleeve seams down, we are moving on to step 4, which says sew the side seams together with right sides facing from the edge of the sleeve through the armhole and down the hem. Press the seam allowance towards the back of the garment. So obviously from the hem of the garment through the armhole, right down to the edge of the sleeve. So we're going to pin these together just so it holds in place. And remember to use 1/4 inch seam allowance for this. Now, if you were using an overlocker to finish your seams, of course you could just directly go straight to the overlocker and then it would trim and sew your seams in one go all at the same time. Now, obviously to show the act of actually sewing it together with a stretch stitch, we are doing that today and then overlocking to finish the seams also. But it is good to note that if you were using an overlocker and did want to do that to save time, you could just completely skip the step of sewing it together with a machine and go straight to the overlocker and overlock all the way down the edge. So what we're going to do is now sew one side down, and then we'll do the exact same thing. We'll pin the other side, sew that down, and then we will press the seam towards the back of the garment. So with right side still together, let's just go across to the other side and pin the other side seam together. And we're going to sew either way, from the cuff to the hem or from the hem to the cuff. It's completely up to you. So there we go. As you can see, the side seams are now sewn up, and with the right sides facing out, you can see where obviously the sleeve and armhole seams meet together there, forming a cross. So all you need to do now is finish these seams however you like and press them to the back of the garment. Remember, if you're having trouble locating which is the front and which is the back, go to the seam line of the sleeve and the back, and there should be a double notch, there should be 2 notches. So if you can only see the seam with 1 notch, you know that this panel is the front. So it's great to make a mental note that this one here, with the double notches in the seam allowance, is the back panel. So for the next step, we're going to put this aside for the moment as we're going to start working on the neckline. Step 5, it says sew the two ends of the neck binding together with right sides facing to create a circle. Press the seam allowance open if the seam's unfinished, or to one side if you're using an overlocker stitch. So now that you've joined that together, let's go over to the iron and we can press this seam open. If you did want to overlock it or have a zigzag stitch to catch the end to close the seam, you would just press it to one side.
So while we're here at the iron, we can move on to step 6, which says fold the neck binding in half so that the raw edges meet. The wrong side of the fabric and seam allowance will be towards the inside of the binding, and then press the folded edge. So as you can see, we have the wrong side on the top here, and we're going to fold that in half so the raw edges meet, and we're just going to basically do that all the way around this strip, and we're going to press this edge flat here.
So now that we have our pressed collar, it's ready to attach to the rest of the garment. So let's bring back the rest of the sweatshirt and we can move on to step 7, which is where we will attach the neck binding. So you've got to align the neck binding evenly around the right side of the neck edge. Stitch along the seam line, stretching the binding to fit the neck edge. This neck binding is a little bit smaller than the neck that we've got to attach it to. So this will be most evenly and easily accomplished by evenly quartering both the neck edge and the binding. To do this, you can mark the center front and center back of each edge with a pin. So as you can see on the binding, we're going to use this seam line as the center back, and we're just going to place a pin there. And what we're going to do is we're going to fold that so that's on the end all the way to the other end, and we can see that this right here is going to be the center front. Now, if you can remember, on the sweatshirt pieces we had these notches that we already cut. Here is the front, this is the back piece, so we can again put another pin in here. However, those notches are there to tell us that those are the center of the pieces. So now we need to fold so that the two pins meet and mark the halfway point between the center front and the center back. Again, we're going to fold it the other way so that these two pins are both in the same place. And we're going to put another pin on this side, and we're going to do the same for the other side. This is just so that we know it is evenly spread around the neckline and there won't be any gathers or bunching of the material when we attach them together. And if we do the same with the neckline of the sweatshirt, we join them pins together. So I'll just place a pin in that and then do the same for the other side. We're making sure that we're going the right sides of this fabric and the right sides of the binding, which are both on the outside, and we're going to match up the pieces, remove them pins, and I'm going to actually pin it to the sweatshirt. There we go. I'm going to do that for the rest of these. So remember, because we're stretching it to fit, there will be some gathered fabric between these pins here. Making sure that we're not twisting this binding as we're pinning it to the neckline so that it's all the same way. So now we have our neckline binding pinned to our sweatshirt fabric. As we're going to sew the edge here with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, we're going to make sure to stretch the neck binding so that it all lies flat and there's no gathering or tucks. So with the same stretch stitch, let's stitch all the way around the neckline. So once you have finished your seam for the neckline binding, you're going to press the seam allowance towards the body of the garment. So we'll be pressing this down. Otherwise, you can optionally run a line of top stitching around the edge, just catching that raw edge on the bottom to keep it down with a line of stitching. But again, that's personal preference and totally up to you if you want to do that. It's sometimes easier to use a tailor's ham when ironing curved parts of the garment. This just allows it to lay on the natural curve and is a lot easier to iron. So there we go, the neckline binding has been attached. Now, if you have chosen to sew view B, which is the short sleeve variation, these next couple of steps will be slightly different because you don't need to attach the cuffs or the ribbing at the bottom of the hem. So for view B, you fold up and press a 1-inch hem around the bottom of the sleeve, pin it in place and then stitch the hem down. Obviously repeat through the sleeve. Now here we have the long sleeves, however, if you can imagine the short sleeves, all you're going to do is fold this up 1 inch, press that flat and then just sew a stitch around the edge. That's what you would do for the cuffs. Now that is step 10 for view B. For step 11, you do the exact same with the bottom of the jumper. You fold up and press a 1-inch hem around the bottom of the sweatshirt, press this flat and pin in place. Then I would stitch the hem down and then a final press, and that would be your finished jumper if you were sewing view B. So to finish view A, it's very similar to what we've just done. We repeat steps 5 to 7 for the cuff and hemband. Now obviously for the cuffs we will be creating 2 separate loops, one for each arm, whereas the bottom of the sweatshirt, it's 2 pieces. We have a front and a back. Now they're identical pieces, so it doesn't matter which is which, and we're going to sew them down either side to create one big circle. We'll fold that up and then we'll sew that around the bottom of the sweatshirt. So this is very similar to what we've just done with the neckline, however in some other different variations of sizes. Because the cuff and the hembands won't stretch as much as the neckline, it's not necessary to quarter them when we're pinning them together. You can obviously match up the sides and match up the seams and then just pin it together and stretch it evenly around the rest of the hem. So if we're working on the hemband, I'm taking my fabric pieces. These are number 6 with right sides together. So a stitch down this side and a stitch down this side to create a full circle. So let's repeat the steps for the cuffs of the sleeves. Now this is pattern piece number 5, and obviously we have 2 of them, one for each arm. And instead of sewing these together, we are going to fold them right sides together. We're going to sew all the way down this edge, press the seam open, fold it wrong sides facing each other, and press that flat as well. So that would be one of our cuffs, and then we'll repeat that again for the other arm. So now we have pressed and prepared all of our band pieces. We have the cuffs here as well. We're going to start sewing them to the jumper. So if we pick one sleeve, as you notice the seam line that's already there, we can match up with the seam line that we've made in the cuff as well. So with the right side of the fabric facing outwards, if we slip this cuff on there, match up them seams like so, and let's sew this together. The cuff has been attached to the sweatshirt. It's easy as that. So now all we need to do is repeat it for the other sleeve. So now both cuffs are sewn on and finished. All we need to do now is add the hemband. We have the hemband here, and as you can see, there is a seam either side where you've joined the pieces together. We're going to match up the side seams with the shirt and the hemband. As you can see, you don't have to stretch the band as much for the fabric to be flat together. And again, let's sew all the way around this seam. So there we are. We will give our garment a final press and it is ready to wear. And now for the moment of truth. So there we have it. The Linden sweatshirt is an update of the classic style. It's a very easy pattern to sew, and it's a great choice for someone who is a beginner to sewing with knit fabrics. We hope you had fun sewing along with us today, and of course you will be able to find everything you need to make this fabulous Linden sweatshirt tagged down below so that you can easily find all of the products. Also, leave us a comment if you have any questions, and if you did use any of the products in this video, be sure to tag them in your posts. We love to see what you create. You can save this video so that it's easier to find should you need help on your next project. And remember, if you join the Minerva Craft Club, you will receive 10% off all orders for the next 12 months. It's a great way to save money on your makes and also to support local, national and global charities. Of course, you can follow us here at Minerva for more videos like this one, and until next time, thank you for watching.